Apologies, over 30 minutes of the broadcast begins now. The Ministry of Education is one of the losers in the 2021-2022 financial year national budget, losing 294.9 billion shillings from the last financial year. The education sector has been allocated 202.8 billion shillings, with 5.2 billion shillings set aside for TVET students and 12 billion for free primary education. Robert Omer breaks down the details.
Of the 202.8 billion shillings allocated for the Ministry of Education, 12 billion is for free primary education, 2.5 billion is for recruitment of teachers, and 62.2 billion for free day secondary education. 4 billion is for the examination waiver for Class 8 and Form 4 candidates, 1.8 billion school feeding program, 1 billion for competence-based curriculum. 420 million is meant for digital literacy and program and ICT integration in secondary schools, 4.2 billion for primary and secondary school infrastructure, 1.8 billion for construction and equipping technical training institute and vocational training institute, 1.1 billion is meant for access and improving quality of technical institutions. Other proposed allocation for the Ministry of Education include 281.7 billion for Teachers Training College, 76.3 billion for university education, 15.8 billion meant for HELB, and 5.8 billion for secondary school education and quality improvement project. Robert Omer, Switch TV, Nairobi.
Thank you, Robert Omer. Meanwhile, youth working under the Kazi Mtaani program will be smiling to the bank after Treasury allocated them an additional 3 billion shillings in what is aimed at keeping the youth that might have been affected by COVID-19 pandemic at work. Take a look.
In order to empower the youth and support businesses owned by youth, women and people living with disabilities, I have set aside shilling 10 billion for the National Youth Service, shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, shilling 454.1 million for the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, shilling 120 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and shilling 62 million for the Youth Employment and Enterprise Fund.
The National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani has announced he will soon be seeking Parliament's permission to raise Kenya's debt ceiling from 9 trillion Kenyan shillings to a higher figure. Our reporter David Kagina has more details.
The Cabinet Secretary Treasury Ukur Yatani has today read the highest budget ever read in the history of Kenya, standing at 3.66 trillion Kenyan shillings.
Total expenditure in the financial year 2021-22 budget are projected at shilling 3.03 trillion, equivalent 24.5% of GDP, from shilling 2.89 trillion, equivalent 25.8% of GDP in the financial 2020-21 budget.
The largest consumer of the budget being development, something that some members of parliament did not receive well.
Development expenditures, including foreign finance projects, allocations to contingency fund, and conditional transfers to county government, are projected at shilling 669.6 billion.
The financial deficit has, however, reduced from 926 billion in the last budget to 926 billion in the 2021-2022 budget.
Given the projected revenues and grants against the projected expenditure, the fiscal deficit for the financial year 2021-22 budget is projected at shilling 929.7 billion, equivalent to 7.5% of GDP. This fiscal deficit is lower than shilling 976.2 billion, equivalent to 8.7% of GDP in the financial year 2020-21 budget.
From the constantly increasing budgetary allocations and borrowing to fill the deficit, the CS has announced plans to manage the debt.
It is implementing reforms to strengthen the institutional arrangements of public debt management by aligning the operations of the Public Debt Management Office to the PFM Act. In this respect, decisions of the day-to-day management and operations of the public debt management shall be undertaken by the Public Debt Management Office.
The Cabinet Secretary is, however, hopeful that the current debt ceiling will be raised for the budget to be achieved and implemented.
For the amendment of public debt ceiling set in the Public Finance Management Act to enable implementation of debt management operations, including financing of the fiscal deficit.
So far, this year's budget will go down as history as one of the highest, with with an estimated 3.66 trillion expected to be distributed, the government saying it can only raise up to around 2 trillion, meaning that the excess of 1.66 trillion will have to be funded from elsewhere. And if this is not debt, then it must be debt. David Kagina, Switch TV, from the Parliament Buildings, Nairobi.
Thank you, David Kagina. The country's economy is expected to grow by 6.8% the fiscal year 2021-2022, up from the 0.6% growth rate experienced the fiscal year 2020-2021. National Treasury and Planning Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani has articulated the optimism to the national vaccination drive and measures taken to cushion different sectors from the pandemic.
In order to empower the youth and support businesses owned by youth, women and persons living with disabilities, I have set aside shilling 10 billion for the National Youth Service, shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, shilling 454.1 million for the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, shilling 120 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and shilling 62 million for the Youth Employment and Enterprise Fund.
The government has set aside 14.3 billion shillings for the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines in order to facilitate further rollout of the jabs to achieve herd immunity. 121 billion shillings has also been allocated to various programs in the healthcare sector. Harriet Chime files a report.
Adding to the current appropriated budget of 7.6 billion in the fight against COVID-19, the government has set aside another 14.3 billion for the purchase of vaccines.
In order to facilitate further rollout of vaccines to create herd immunity, we propose to allocate shilling 14.3 billion in the financial 2021-22. This is in addition to shilling 7.6 billion appropriated in the current budget.
Healthcare sector has been allocated 121 billion to various programs to improve health outcomes. In the program, 47.7 billion has been allocated to fund programs for the universal health coverage, 8.7 allocated for the COVID-19 response emergency, 4.1 billion allocated to free maternity health care, 7.2 billion allocated to managed equipment services, 1.8 billion allocated for medical cover for the elderly and disabled, 5.8 billion has been allocated to lower cases of HIV, malaria and TB, 3.9 billion has been allocated to the vaccination program. To improve health service delivery, 15.2 billion has been allocated to the Kenyatta National Hospital, 11.5 billion allocated to Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 7.3 billion allocated to Kenya Medical Training Centers. CS Yatani has also proposed amendment to the value-added tax to aid in affordable treatment and strengthening the health system, urging suppliers to make prices affordable.
I propose to provide VAT exemptions to diagnostic and laboratory reagents, artificial respirators, including therapeutic respiration apparatus, breathing appliances, gas masks, as well as medical equipment and technologies used in the provision of medical care services.
Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Harriet Chimea.
Thank you, Harriet Chimea. Meanwhile, the government has proved its commitment in increasing surveillance on tax offenders by extending rewards to members of the public for information on tax decliners. Kenyans can now earn a reward of up to 200,000 and 5 million Kenyan shillings for providing information that will improve tax compliance by foreign and local investors.
We have noted in our iTax system perennial non-compliant taxpayers, defaulters, payment returns without payment, non-filers, nil filers, credit filers, stop filers, and decliners. In addition, there are traders and merchants who are not registered at all for tax purposes. Mr. Speaker, to gather information on tax malpractices, last year, we introduced the iWhistle, a platform that enables members of the public to volunteer information. As at the end of April 2021, the iWhistle platform had received a total of 502 whistles, and we thank the public for volunteering useful information. Considering the complexities and changing dynamics of intelligence gathering, and to empower the Kenya Revenue Authority tax malpractices, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act to increase the maximum reward to a person who provides information leading to the identification of unassessed taxes from shilling 100,000 to Kenya shilling 500,000. Further, I propose to increase the reward to a person who provides information leading to recovery from maximum of Kenya shilling 2 million to Kenya shilling 5 million. This will encourage receipt of voluntary information to Kenya Revenue Authority, thereby bolstering tax compliance and revenue collections.
The judiciary has been allocated 13.6 billion shillings less than what immediate former Chief Justice David Maraga had requested in the year 2019. The arm of government has today been allocated 17.9 billion shillings from the 3.66 trillion budget of the financial year 2021-2022. Caroline Sumer tells us more.
Judiciary as an arm of government has least benefited in the just concluded budget allocation reading of the year 2021-2022. According to CS Treasury Ukur Yatani's budget, the Parliament has received 37.9 billion shillings, County Devolution 409 billion Kenya shillings, County Development Funds CDF has been allocated 41.7 billion Kenya shillings, whereas the judiciary has received 17.9 billion shillings. Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission EACC has received 3.2 billion Kenya shillings. Office of the Directorate of Public Prosecution ODPP has received 3.2 billion shillings. In the budget reading year 2020-2021, the judiciary received 15 billion shillings, whereas in the year 2019-2020, it received 19.8 billion shillings. Even with the increase of 2 billion Kenya shillings, the judiciary has been less allocated 13.6 billion shillings. This comes after retired Chief Justice David Maraga requested for 31.5 billion shillings in 2019, accusing the government of undermining the judiciary through low budget allocation. According to nominated Member of Parliament David Sankok, what the judiciary has been allocated is more than enough.
More than enough. What do they do apart from listening to what you are saying and then they decide which case? Let me tell you, if there is anything that have taken us back, I must be sincere, it is the judiciary. The people who are saying they want money to do what? To file again more cases.
Caroline Suma, Switch TV.
Now with Caroline Sumer, we now take a short commercial break. Stay tuned, we'll be back with more. Welcome back and thank you for keeping it Switch TV. In an effort to maximize the benefits of cash crops in the country, the National Treasury has made a huge investment towards the revival of output in the agricultural sector, making it one of the big gainers in this year's budget. Apollo James breaks it down for us.
In order to support the aspirations of attaining 100% food and nutrition security, the Treasury has set aside 60 billion to relevant programs in this sector. Further 2.6 billion has been set aside for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, 1.8 billion proposed for the Emergency Locust Response, 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, 1.5 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Program, and 1.5 billion for the Small Scale Value. 8.9 billion has been set aside for the climate-smart agricultural productivity projects to increase agricultural productivity and enhance resilience to climate change risk in targeted smallholder farming and pastoral communities in Kenya. The CS further stated that the rehabilitation of the meter gauge railway has improved interconnectivity and reduced traffic congestion on our roads.
The rehabilitation of the meter gauge railway has improved interconnectivity and reduced traffic congestion on our roads. To continue improving public transport within the Nairobi metropolitan area, I have set aside Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for railway metro lines. Further, Mr. Speaker, to expand railway transport to the rest of the country, I have set aside Kenya shilling 27.2 billion for phase 2 of the standard gauge railway.
Apollo James, Switch TV.
Thank you, Apollo James. Budget Day is a day the government presents its budget to the legislature for approval to plan and manage its financial resources to support the implementation of various programs and projects that best promote the development of the country. Today, Treasury CS Ukur Yatani made his way from the National Treasury to Parliament in ceremonial fashion, accompanied by various stakeholders, among them including CBK Governor Patrick Njoroge. Take a look.
All eyes were fixed as the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani made the short journey from the Treasury to the Parliament building. He was joined by the Chief Administrative Secretary of the National Treasury, the Principal Secretary, the Central Bank of Kenya Governor, the Kenya Revenue Authority Director General, and other Director Generals from various departments. His entourage was heavily guarded by security personnel who are heavily armed, walking on both sides of his vehicle. The road was cleared from use by other road users, with the members of the Fourth Estate scrambling for a clear shot of the once-in-a-year occurrence. The Cabinet Secretary then headed to the Parliament, and when the clock struck 3:15 in the afternoon, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi ushered him to make his 2021-2022 3.6 trillion shillings budget statement. Being his second budgeting reading happening in the middle of a world pandemic, the Cabinet Secretary reflected on the current macroeconomic conditions which have largely been affected by the coronavirus. The 2021-2022 financial year's budget is expected to cement the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta's 10 years in office in a tough economic setting clouded with depressed corporate and household earnings amid uncertainties arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Rachel Ndwati, Switch TV.
Thank you, Rachel Duarte. In other stories, Deputy President William Ruto has said the change of the Constitution should not be informed by the passions of those in power. The Deputy President further noted that in a circumstance where the interest of those in power in conflict with the Constitution, then the passage should be changed, should be in line with the Constitution.
Ati mamlaka na kutafuta uongozi itafuata vile mtu anataka, na sheria na katiba itamsaidia kutimiza malengo yake. Na malengo yake yakiwa tofauti na vile katiba inasema, katiba ibadilishwe ndio ifuatane na malengo ya mtu. Lakini sisi tunasema uongozi na mamlaka ni ya wananchi.
Elsewhere, impeached Wajir Governor Abdi Mohamud is now warning that failure to obey court orders could lead to clashes in the county. One of the Deputy Inspector Generals of Police has also been drawn into the power struggle being witnessed in the county. Our senior political reporter Joel Chacha with his story.
The Council of Governors headquarters in Westlands, Nairobi. No entrance for the members of the Fourth Estate. No entry for the convoy of impeached Wajir Governor Abdi Mohamud, while invited the press for an update of his case in the High Court. This contingent of anti-riot police officers remained firm of blocking way, which prompted Mohamud to hold the news conference in another venue in the city, where he addressed his impeachment petition that is before the three-judge bench of the Meru High Court.
And it said that I shall continue to be in office to execute the powers and functions of the governor of Wajir County as prescribed by the law until the petition is heard and determined.
He further laments alleged frustrations from accessing and serving as governor till the petition is heard and determined, despite the 4 court orders issued.
We go to that direction and start implementing court orders selectively, then I'm afraid this country will fall apart.
It is not the government that is not observing the court orders. We know the person who's abusing his office. The person who is abusing his office and he is from Wajir. He is the Deputy IG, Nur Gabu. He comes from Wajir. He has an interest in this political conflict. And he's even using an inspector of police who comes from Wajir. And he's called Mohammed Diad Muhammad.
According to those in support of Mohamud, the alleged intention of those behind the impeachment is to cause clashes in the county.
Want to cause clashes, as their intention for this process was to cause clashes between communities in Wajir. That was the whole intention towards the election. And we do not want to play into their game, because it's very simple for us to go to Wajir and make the masses move against the people, the decision.
The power struggle in Wajir County has since thrown residents in limbo, and the verdict by the three-judge bench will determine what next. Joel Chacha, Switch TV, Nairobi.
Thank you, Joel Chacha. Now away from politics. The principal of Aina Moi High School in Kericho County continues to suffer head and shoulder injuries after being attacked and badly injured by a Form 3 student. Credible sources report that the two disagreed over the payment of tuition fees, and later the student went to the principal's office with a piece of wood nailed and hit the head of the head teacher more than 4 times. Confirming the incident, Kericho County Police Commander said security agencies were still searching for the suspect who escaped after the incident and called on students to find alternative ways to solve problems without resorting to violence.
I can confirm to you that yesterday, around 21 hours, there was an incident that took place at Aina Moi Secondary School, where a student of Form 3 confronted and assaulted the principal of that secondary school and inflicted injuries on the principal, on the head, shoulder, and thereafter the student disappeared. So as we are talking, we are still looking for the assailant.
And from the business desk, the Gulf African Bank has launched cash deposit machine services that allows its customers to directly deposit cash to their account physically. The service, that is one of a kind in the country's financial space, has the ability of depositing up to 70,000 shillings in less than a minute. Our business reporter Bran Mwende explains.
The Gulf African Bank has unveiled cash deposit machine service that will enable clients to make deposit directly into their accounts at their convenience. The financial giant's managing director Abdallah Abdul Khalik has articulated the continued focus on technology to the bank's commitment to make transacting more convenient, more efficient and safer for the bank's customers.
We are trying to strive for efficiency, and one of the things that customer efficiency is concerned is time. Sometimes people come to deposit in our banking halls 3 to 4 million at a go. This takes so much time for the teller to count. It takes so much time for the customer to wait as the money is being counted. And it also takes time of others who are waiting for that teller to be freed up for them to do that.
The cash deposit machines are located at the cash deposit machines are located at the bank's Kenyatta Avenue branch, at Eastleigh Main branch, and at Bondeni and Koima branches in Mombasa.
Now, with this machine, you can come deposit your cash and come out with a receipt within less than 1 minute, because this is the Gulf African Bank, and together we are excellent in trust. Brian Mwanda, Switch TV.
It's now time to get sporty. Ajax goalkeeper Andre Onana has had his doping ban reduced to 9 months by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Onana had been handed a 12-month suspension ban starting 5th February this year after failing a doping test. The 24-year-old Cameroon international had mistakenly taken medication prescribed for his wife while feeling unwell. Onana, who is Arsenal's top target, will be able to train again from the 3rd of September and play on the 3rd of November. Arsenal were waiting for the verdict before deciding whether to make a move for him this summer. Now back home, Sports Docket, which falls under the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Heritage, has received a 1 billion increment up from 14 billion allocated last year to 15 billion shillings this coming financial year, which represents a 7% increase. Cedric Oronje tells us more.
The Kenyan government, through the National Treasury Docket, Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, has today allocated a total sum of 15 billion to the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Natural Heritage in a bid to resuscitate the docket, which has had heat with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Proposed an allocation of Shilling 15 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund.
However, the sum appears to be an increase compared to 2020-2021 sports budget allocation, which stood at 14 billion, a 7% increase on the same. Judging from 2 past financial years, where the sports allocation stood at 5.3 billion, meant to cater for over 70 sports federations in the country. The 15 billion sum seeks to ensure that 19 million is allocated to refurbish the 9 stadia proposed by the Big Four agenda and also facilitate Kenyan athletes representing the country in various competitions like the Olympic Games set for July and August in Tokyo, Japan, and World Under-20 Championships to be held in Nairobi, among others. Cedric Oronje, Switch TV.
Thank you, Cedric Oronje. You know, up next is Tipping Point with Frederick Mutiriri. Fred is right here. Now, Fred,
yes,
what stands out for you in this year's financial budget?
First of all, thank you very much. I'll be doing Tipping Point for the time being. Thank you for holding the forte.
anytime, Fred.
Big story. A budget of 3.66 trillion shillings. How are we going to even manage it? So tonight, I have Millie Odhiambo, MP Suba North. I have Sakwa Bunyasi, MP Nambale. Also, I have ISPAC officer who will be telling us more about the budget. So stay still. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
That is what Fred says all the time. Hold still. That's just the tip of the iceberg of what's coming up right next from 7:30 all the way to 8:30 with Frederick Mutiriri. I am Lincoln Ombogo. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Tracy Dorcas. Many thanks for watching. Good evening.